Hey there and welcome back to Kingdom Come Deliverance. My name is Pete and today we complete part 2 of this getting started guide, which will finally take us out of the tutorial and into the game's open world. Thank you so much for all the wonderful feedback on the first video. I'm happy to see that this mini-series is well received, and I might do something similar for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 if you continue to enjoy these videos. Now, last time we left off, after completing the Skalitz prologue, your Henry should have entered the final cutscene at the forge with some light clothing, some food and healing potions, 100 to 200 groschen, and, perhaps most importantly, a few handy perks and skill levels, particularly in the speech, herbalism and lockpicking skills. So then, after the cutscene at your father's forge, it's time to run. You won't see him initially, but you have an enemy close on your heels running after you, and unless you went completely overboard power leveling Henry and Skalitz, you won't be able to defeat him in combat. So follow the path, hugging the mountain wall on the left until you reach a house and some horses in front of it. You'll also see Teresa being hassled by humans, so before mounting the first horse you see, whistle using the same key you used to mount the horse to attract the human's attention and to unlock the Cavalier achievement. Then ride off and watch another brief cutscene during which Henry unfortunately gets injured. Afterwards, you'll have to use your full gallop to stay ahead of the horse archers pursuing you. Stay on the path until Henry himself tells you to turn left.
Left. Talmberg is to the left, along the stream.
Alternatively, turn left immediately after passing the burning village of Rovna, the one with the big church tower. Not only does this shorten your path a bit, but upon crossing the stream a little further down the field, there's a good chance the enemy riders get tangled up in the terrain. If you see the sword icon at the top of the screen, switch from crossed to uncrossed swords. That means you're still in combat, but no one is actively shooting at you, which is a good thing, as your horse will eventually get tired, indicated by blowing and wheezing noises, and if the archers are still in pursuit, it is actually possible for them to kill you, although it is highly unlikely. Now, there is one slightly cheesy thing you might want to do to gain another small advantage for later. Once you cross this little stone bridge, ideally with your pursuers already far behind you, open your inventory and select the Sidekicks tab. Here, go to Tack, and you can see that apart from a plain saddle and bridle, your horse also carries a noble saddle worth over 1000 groschen and a second bridle. Take both, and maybe even the bridle your horse has equipped, although this will reduce the horse's speed slightly, so that's why we're doing it at the end of the ride here. The plain saddle meanwhile can stay on, it's just too heavy to be worth the hassle. Curiously, the noble saddle is not accessible before triggering the first cutscene involving the horse archers. Also, a warning, sometimes the game likes to turn your horse around after doing this, so pay close attention to avoid riding back into the human's arms. After following the path for just a little longer, you'll be treated to another cutscene as Henry finally reaches Talmberg. After your initial conversation with Lord Divish, he'll head to a side room for a private discussion with the bailiff that you can listen into for a bit of extra dialogue, but make sure to not step inside the room itself, as it is considered private. At this point, you are technically free to explore, but you're hungry and tired, so it's best to speak to Sir Robard right away, who'll lead you to the kitchen for some food. Very important at this point, there are several villagers who may approach you and ask about Skalitz. Agreeing to share your story triggers 2 simple dialogue checks for each of them that are easy to pass by just picking the speech option for some extra XP. However, these villagers are extremely easy to miss, and if you happen to walk away while they approach you, not only will you lose reputation, but you also won't be able to speak to them again. I recommend dropping a save as soon as you exit the Talmberg introductory cutscene, just to make sure you don't accidentally miss them. Now, no matter how rested or well fed you are when leaving Skalitz, you'll always arrive in Talmberg with rest at 30 and hunger at 15, so the kitchen is indeed where you want to go next. Let's take a brief moment to look closer at KCD's food mechanics, which are perhaps a bit more complex than those you might know from other games. Generally, all food satisfies your hunger, the game calls this nourishment, and plenty of foods also restore a small amount of health. Some foods, however, like cheese or roasted meats for example, also increase your tiredness, so stick to lighter options if you plan to stay active. This is especially important in this section as you are already very tired upon arriving. On top of these mechanics, most food items also spoil over time, the only exception are drinks and dried fruits and meats. Items with a red condition value are spoiled and can cause food poisoning, which reduces strength, agility and vitality while also gradually depleting your health. Therefore, always try to keep your nourishment between 50 and 100. Overeating, a value above 100, reduces your maximum stamina, while a value below 50 means you're hungry and does the same, and eventually even causes health loss due to starvation. Maintaining a value between 50 and 100 for 5 consecutive days also unlocks the Balanced Diet perk, which grants a permanent +1 bonus to vitality and agility. It won't be possible to unlock this just yet, but keep it in mind for later. For now, eat up, note the easy lock chest in the kitchen, and head to bed in the building in the courtyard. At this point, Henry is exhausted, so while you could explore the castle further, it's best to get a full night's rest. You also don't need to bother with how many hours of sleep exactly, it will soon be interrupted by a nighttime conversation with Lady Stephanie anyway. During this conversation, Lady Stephanie will ask about the events in Skalitz. This is a timed dialogue, so you need to choose your answers quickly. Agree to tell the story and stick to the charisma-based options to succeed every time and to further level up your speech skill. In Kingdom Come Deliverance, successful dialogue isn't just about using the highest stat, it's also about choosing options that match the tone of the conversation.
Oh.
As an example, in this nightly conversation with Lady Stephanie, going through the gruesome details of the Skalitz raid by picking the Intimidate option won't earn you any favors, while sticking to the more emotional and personal speech or charisma options matches her concern for you much better. And yes, speech and charisma are two different things in KCD. Speech is generally how persuasive you are, how capable you are of talking yourself out of situations or how well you can haggle, while charisma is more an overall measure of your social standing and impressiveness, if you will, which is why dressing in fancy clothes can improve this stat but not improve speech, and also why it works quite well here on the Lady of the Castle.
That's terrible. How could something like that happen?
After the conversation, Henry will go back to sleep, but not for long. This time he'll be woken up by Sir Robart. Despite Robart's urgency, this marks the perfect moment for some nighttime shenanigans, as it is dark and all the guards are on the battlements, leaving the inside of the castle largely unguarded. Many rooms have chests containing useful items that are much harder to get into during the day or once the guards return, so I hope you saved some lockpicks. Just like in Skalitz, I'll point out some recommended targets for you, starting with the room right next to yours. The door may or may not be locked, and the easy lock chest inside has plenty of clothing, some of it quite valuable. Early on, I'd recommend grabbing everything with a value to weight ratio of 25 or higher, just so you don't overload yourself with junk. Illuminate your path with the torch you grabbed from your end table, and find 2 more chests in the buildings around the courtyard. One behind the second door to the right upon exiting your sleeping quarters, and the other behind the wooden double door directly opposite. Both have some bandages that you might want to grab, otherwise pick your loot based on weight and value. Should you happen to reach lockpicking level 3 at any point, select the Lasting Lockpicks perk, we already talked about that one, and then it's time to make a decision. You can leave it at that, or not even pick any locks at all if that's what you wish to do, or you can snoop around a bit more. For example, in the room leading to the kitchen, there's a chest to the left that can hold some more valuable clothing items, and the chest in the kitchen itself can also be picked. Heading up the stairs into the room where you had your first conversation with Divish and Robart, there's a locked chest in the far right corner with goblets and other trinkets inside, and the door on the left can also be picked at skill level 3, although the chest and cabinet behind it can't be picked even at level 4. Lootable at level 4, meanwhile, is the chest in the sleeping chamberlain's room, while the bookshelf next to his bed can be accessed as it is for some literature that Henry can't read just yet. Taking the exterior steps to the top floor, you'll come across another chest to the right containing a few extra torches that you probably won't need, while the door right next to it leads into Lady Stephanie's room. And this room contains one of the highest value chests in Talmberg, and it's only an easy lock, giving you quick access to several high-value clothing items. The very hard chest in her room, meanwhile, cannot be picked, even at level 4, and the same is true for the other very hard chests on this floor. Only the hard one in the room next to Lady Stephanie's is accessible at lockpicking level 4. Heading to the far end of the corridor and back outside to the left leads to a wooden walkway that eventually brings you to a locked door leading into a watchtower. Inside, take the ladders going up. The first floor has a very easy, the second one an easy chest. Going down, meanwhile, there is nothing to loot. Heading back to that wooden exterior staircase, there is one more location you can explore, as another wooden walkway at the top leads into another guard tower on the right. In this one, however, there is a guard sleeping right next to the hard-locked chest, and even a successful lockpicking attempt is likely to be overheard.
Hey, what are you doing poking around in that lock?
So either choke the guard out in his sleep, at which point you might as well loot him too, or skip this chest altogether in favor of the one on the floor above. The loot inside is pretty much identical to the chest below. This also more or less concludes the list of targets available to you during this night, and depending on how thorough you were, you could now be quite a bit over the carrying capacity. In that case, dump your excess goods in the chest near the courtyard, the one behind the double doors. My personal recommendation for a balance of role-playing and skill progression would be to at least aim to reach lockpicking skill level 3 during this section, as the lasting lockpicks perk makes things much easier going forward. If you already reached that during Skalitz or with one of the first chests, then by all means feel free to keep going until you hit level 4, but you really don't need to go overboard. Either way, once you're done and have everything stored away, proceed to the battlements. You can talk to the guards and ask what's happening. Every bit of dialogue earns you a small amount of speech XP, but you won't get any answers until you reach Robard and Divish. After the cutscene, speak to Robard again, who tasks you with keeping watch. Walk around the battlements for a short while. One of the guards will approach you after a few moments, telling you to just wait.
I don't think anything much will be happening today. You can just lean against the wall and wait till morning.
You can either do so right here or head back to bed. It doesn't make a difference. If you wish, talk to a few more guards to get their opinion on the nightly events, then advance time until shortly after 5 AM, when you'll hear an alarm. This time, head out of the castle, following the others, and watch yet another cutscene. Once it finishes playing, it's time to start working on getting back to Skalitz. Start by speaking to Robard, who, regardless of how high your speech or charisma skill is, will deny you permission to leave the castle.
Sorry, lad, but I won't take orders. You'll have to wait until everything settles down, and maybe your lord will change his mind.
Speak to the gate guard afterwards, who will be a bit more easily persuaded with the speech option, but still won't let you leave just yet. Pointing out that you might want to disguise yourself as a Talmberg guard, your next objective is now clear. Let's hope you haven't used up all of your lockpicks. If you have, you'll need to visit Trader Votova, who is sitting on a bench in the village just next to the gate and has some for sale, but they are not cheap. Luckily, Lady Stephanie seems to like you, even if you robbed her blind during the night, so pay her a visit and exhaust all dialogue options for some advice on where to find a guard's uniform, and for a few groschen as well, enough to purchase a lockpick should you need one.
Thank you, my lady. I will repay you, I swear.
Even if you don't, paying Votova a visit afterwards might still be worth it, as he also sells a treasure map. There's 25 of these in the game, each leading to a hidden treasure. You can of course find those even without the map, but for the sake of true completion, acquiring all maps might be on your list, and Votova can sell you the first one. He will also accept stolen goods in return, albeit at a drastically reduced price. Regardless of how you dealt with Votova, I'd personally skip the map as it costs a significant amount of your current funds. Your next destination is now the armory, located near the stairs leading up to the battlements. The door is unlocked, but the area is private, so if guards see or hear you entering, they'll be quick to check on you. Thus, either make sure you slip in unnoticed, or loop around the battlements and head in from the other side, which tends to be a little less frequented. To advance the main quest, stealing and equipping the gear from the very easy chest on the ground floor is enough, but there's a bit more to be had if you go upstairs. Not only are there 4 barrels with arrows and sometimes weapons too in them, there's also 2 bows by the table and 2 hard-locked chests with shields and weapons. If you're lucky, you can sometimes find a valuable sword in one, or even in both of them, although Henry's agility stat will likely not allow him to use it effectively just yet. Additionally, grabbing a shield can help tremendously in some of the early combat encounters, and there are several available in the armory that are easy to take without being seen. Climbing the ladder down to the armory's bottom floor then reveals 2 more chests and another barrel. Although only the hard-locked chest can be looted, the very hard remains inaccessible even at lockpicking level 4. Once you have outfitted yourself, you're good to go, but do note, wearing stolen gear on you, that means having it equipped, will sometimes prompt guards to search you, especially if it is something very valuable and thus recognizable. You are safe from that happening in this scenario, but down the line it can happen. Selling and buying stolen goods back from people who accept them in the first place, like Votova or other fences you'll meet down the line, gets rid of this problem by removing an item's stolen tag, but it does cost a pretty penny. Now, before finally leaving Castle Talmberg, you can have one last small thieving spree, as some locks in rooms that are frequented by guards and villagers will have been relocked after the night is over, potentially allowing for a second picking and thus more experience points. Since it is daytime and the castle inhabitants have resumed their normal activities though, this can be pretty risky, and it is entirely optional, but it could get you to lockpicking level 5. Finally, you can also purchase some food from the cook and sell her your legally acquired goods, whatever those may be at this point, and take whatever you haven't eaten from the kitchen if you're hungry. But apart from that, as long as the village of Talmberg itself is still locked to you, there's not much else to do. Now, the game recommends taking a horse when leaving the castle, and depending on how thoroughly you have looted the place, or at least depending on how much of the stuff you stole you want to take with you, this may or may not be possible. The horse you took from Skalitz is still in the courtyard, and it can be mounted even if you're overloaded, but there's a limit of about 110 pounds carried. Once you have more than that on you, you will no longer be able to saddle up. So make a decision, either leave some stuff behind, or take everything and leave the horse, proceeding on foot and rather slowly at that. Be warned though, whatever you leave behind you won't have access to for quite some time once you leave. Head down to the gate, and if you're wearing the correct gear, the guard will let you leave and closes the gate behind you so you won't get back in. Alternatively, if you don't want to go through all the trouble of stealing armor and persuading the guard, you can also just jump off the drawbridge and escape the castle that way. Beware, with the negative brittle bones perk for extra fall damage, this can seriously hurt you. Guards will also be after you and will catch you if you can't sprint from being overweight, but it is by far the quickest and easiest way to leave. At this point, if you're above the carry weight limit, regardless of whether or not your horse still carries you, I highly recommend riding down into Talmberg village and renting a room at the local inn. For the low price of just 2 groschen, not only does this allow you to save your game by sleeping in the bed, but you can also store all your excess gear in the chest. The useful thing about this, chests in taverns and inns are connected via a shared inventory system, so anything you store in here you can access from any other room you rent later. Doing this is strongly encouraged, as being overweight can slow down the next part of your journey quite a bit, as you'll be on foot for most of it, even if you initially took a horse. It can even be dangerous, more on that in a second. I recommend storing everything apart from a torch, perhaps a shield, a bow and some arrows, your worn gear, make sure to keep the guard armor equipped for now, some savior's schnapps, Radzig's sword, which you can't drop anyway, and a few lightweight items like lockpicks and bandages. On the tavern grounds, Marta will buy stolen goods from you, again not recommended because of the hefty price reduction. There's a villager you can play dice with, and you can chat about this and that with some of the other folks around. This might also just get you to speech level 4, at which point I recommend picking the Highborn perk for a +3 speech increase when talking to nobles. This is mutually exclusive with the Lowborn perk, but commoners and peasants usually don't have the highest stats, and they can be charmed or bullied to get what you want, whereas the bonus comes in handy with the nobility, who do not appreciate that kind of behavior. Once you have unloaded everything, it's time to head towards Skalitz. Don't worry, you won't need to go the entire distance. After just a few moments on horseback, or a few more on foot, you are treated to a cutscene that takes you most of the rest of the way. From here on out, you'll have to proceed on foot, regardless of whether you took a horse or not. You may notice that you have returned to the small village of Rovna, and you are surrounded by dead bodies that you can loot, but don't get your hopes up. Apart from the occasional coin or dried food item, it's not really worth it, and it also does not make you any better than the looters you're about to encounter. Just a few meters down the path, you'll run into the first one. Time for your very first real combat encounter. You'll be using Radzig's sword for this, so no additional weapons are needed, and I recommend playing it aggressively. Your gear outmatches the looters by far, so you can take the occasional hit while he goes down quickly. However, if you are aiming for the merciful achievement and don't want to kill anyone, you can alternatively just take a wide berth around this guy, as well as all following looters, by staying off the roads. Once they spot you and engage in combat, they will follow you for quite some time, and there's multiple along the way, so if you want to avoid fighting, it's better to not get spotted in the first place. Unless you're going for this achievement though, I recommend fighting them to gain some valuable experience points towards your combat skills. This is also the section where being overloaded can be extremely dangerous, as outrunning the looters won't be possible, and fighting them might also be harder. So unless you plan to and can circumvent them entirely, it's better to have some spare carrying capacity. After the first looter has been dealt with, it doesn't matter which path you take, both eventually merge back into each other. Then, once you get to the broken down cart, continue down that road and witness Henry shoo off another looter you won't have to fight. For some highly recommended extra loot, head left once you reach the small shrine. You'll come across a bridge, and on the other side of it, head down the bank to the right to find a treasure chest. In hardcore mode, the loot inside is a little reduced, but still very much worth grabbing. The total value here is just over 1,500 groschen. Make sure not to advance too much further towards the building though, as a group of bandits has taken up residence here, and they are much tougher than the looters. So return to the path. If you're itching for a bit more combat, head all the way back to the shrine, and then take the fork on the right to meet another looter, one that you would otherwise be able to circumvent by taking a more direct route from the hidden treasure chest back to the road leading to Skalitz. Back on that road, you'll soon find the nearest gate into the village completely crumbled and need to loop around for the next one. Another looter sits across the path. This one is number 3, so deal with him as you see fit. Do note that upon landing the first 2 to 3 hits on these guys, the looters will most likely realize that they are outmatched and yield, at which point you can show mercy and let them live, thus gaining both some combat XP and keeping your hopes of unlocking the merciful achievement alive. While it is extremely likely that this happens, it is not guaranteed, so engage in fights at your own risk or drop a save beforehand. Finally, you'll enter the burned down village of Skalitz. One of the first bodies you'll come across is the bailiff's. Henry makes a remark about him dying with his sword in his hand, a sword that you won't find when pressing the loot button. Instead, pick it up directly from his hand. It is a decent starter weapon. Eventually, you'll also find Bianca, who you can take a ring and some Saviour's schnapps from, and eventually you'll reach your parents, watch the cutscene, and then begin the search for a spade. For this, you'll have to go back into the village, and another cutscene will play as soon as you come across Zbyszek's house. Pick the speech option in the first dialogue check for some experience points, then you can make him leave without a fight by selecting the intimidate option.
I've interrupted you robbing the dead. Is that why you're so ill-tempered? You bastard. Haven't you got a shred of honor?
Alternatively, provoke him into a fight. Be warned though, he is a capable brawler, and a one-on-one fist fight with him is everything but guaranteed to go well. However, you can always draw your weapon during the scuffle with him. That will send him packing immediately. Once he's dealt with, grab the spade, but importantly, before heading to Henry's home to dig the grave, head for the small alley between the 2 houses directly to the opposite side. It appears as if someone has already been busy burying a few of the corpses in the village, as you can dig up a body right next to the pile of manure below the wooden pole. The gear on this one is all extremely tattered and not worth taking, but jumping the fence to the left a little further down, there is another grave right behind the burnt down building in the middle. And this one contains 50 groschen and a valuable cup that you both want to take. Admittedly, looting this grave early can feel a bit cheesy, as you only learn about it later, but this saves you a bit of backtracking, and who knows, a curious Henry may have stumbled upon it by accident anyway.
I know this goblet. It belongs to Baron. But who knows? Maybe he managed to get away. Now what?
Apart from this, though, no further loot can be acquired. All other houses are conveniently inaccessible, so head to your house next. Before digging the grave, pick the lock on the chest in the room to the right. Even if you picked it during the prologue, it is locked again at this point. Then grab everything from your trunk, no matter how overloaded this makes you. Head outside and dig the grave, which triggers another cutscene that eventually leads into a fight that you cannot win, so don't even bother. For the last bit of optimizing, you might even want to take off all armor and clothing before the cutscene to avoid them getting damaged, but since it just takes 1 to 2 hits to down you, this might be overkill. Another cutscene plays, and finally you'll be treated to the opening title. Yes, everything up until now was just the introduction. Enjoy the beautiful scenery, and then get transported back into a nightmarish red as you find yourself back in Skalitz reliving the events of the raid. In this section you still have your sword, so use it to take out as many people as you can, as this actually translates into real-world experience points, and yes, even taking out the villagers counts. Eventually you'll wake up with Teresa standing over you, you get to have a few short conversations with her, and then you're back up on your feet in the Mill of Rattay.
A word with you, young fellow.
This is where the game really begins to open up, and also where we make the cut for the second video in this mini-series. Things will of course continue with at least one more video, as there is still quite a bit more left to cover. I also get the feeling that I may be explaining things in slightly too much detail, but I hope you still enjoy it, and if you did, then please leave a thumbs up, it really helps me out. Just like last time, you are also invited to leave a comment with any additional tips and tricks you may have for Talmberg and the return to Skalitz. And if you like what I'm doing and want to support the channel further, consider subscribing, becoming a channel member, or supporting me on Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.